The Major Arcana on the Tree of Life. Applications of the Sefer Yetzirah. As has been indicated, the tarot is usually related to the Sefer Yetzirah or Book of Formation. This brief, but major, document of esoteric cosmology purports to demonstrate the rational framework and course of creation of our universe. Yet, as with all truly enlightened works, it is not intended to be read, it must, rather, be used as a stimulus to meditation. The Sefer Yetzirah uses the symbolism of highly abstract words to describe those energies which the tarot describes in pictures, the corresponding links being the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Thus, any comment on a Hebrew letter may also be taken to be a comment on the tarot card to which that particular letter is attributed. To approach the tarot from the standpoint of the Sefer Yetzirah adds an important dimension to the study of the cards. Moreover, the ancient document is so short that this is not a difficult task. Let us begin by applying selected passages of this work to the tarot traditionally placed on the Tree of Life. The maternals: air, water, fire. From the spirit he produced air, and formed in it 22 sounds, the letters. 3 are mothers, 7 are double, and 12 are simple, but the spirit is first and above these. The Fool is air. All of the other tarot cards are implicit in this transitional air, they all arise from air. From the air, he formed the waters, and from the formless and void, made mire and clay, and designed surfaces upon them, and hewed recesses in them, and formed the strong material foundation. The Hanged Man is water. It is the basis of matter, and is a part of microprosopis on the Tree of Life, at the site of the Pillar of Severity. Alchemists call water the root of all minerals. From the water he formed fire and made for himself a throne of glory with Ophanim, Seraphim and Cherubim as his ministering angels, and with those 3 he completed his dwelling. Judgment is fire. The final maternal connects microprosopis with its bride, Malkuth, again on the site of the Pillar of Severity. As the path of the flaming sword, which is the path of emanation of the Sephiroth, crosses the abyss from Binah to Chest where no path exists, so there is the possibility of passage across the abyss from Chokmah to Jabura, although this is not a viable possibility for the developing spirit. Were this done, it would be possible to move up and down the Tree of Life using only 3 paths, those of the maternals. From Kether the path of the Fool leads to Chokmah. From Chokmah it is a leap across the terrible abyss to Jabura. From Jabura is the path of the Hanged Man into Had. Finally, the path of judgment leads into the material completion of Malkuth. There is a quality of mind game to working with the Sefer Yetzirah in this way, but the method is essential to understanding the ways in which the tarot embodies high Kabbalistic principle. The double letters: planets, localities, days, gateways, contrasts. The initial commentary on the double letters states that they are so called because each letter represents a contrast or permutation. In fact, each of these 7 letters has 2 pronunciations, one hard and one soft. The letters refer, in order, to life and death, peace and war, wisdom and folly, riches and poverty, grace and indignation, fertility and solitude, power and servitude. These are the pairs of opposites which we can apply to the designated tarot trumps. These 7 double letters point out 7 localities: above, below, east, west, north, south, and the palace of holiness, in the midst of them sustaining all things. This describes the hexagram, related to the central Sephiroth on the Tree of Life. These 7 double letters he designed, produced and combined and formed with them the planets, stars of the universe, the days of the week, and the gates of the soul, the orifices of perception, in man. At the onset it is important to appreciate that as the planets are attributed to paths, they are not the same as planets attributed to Sephiroth, which are, at one level, the bodily chakras or metals of the alchemists. To the magician, for example, Mercury is applied, but this differs from the Mercury which is the mundane chakra of the Sephira Had. It is what Mathers called the philosophic Mercury. The paths involving planets must be considered transitional, as are those paths to which elements are attributed. They always represent the action of one energy on another because they link together 2 Sephiroth. The same may be said for the paths of the zodiac, where the action of one planet on another occurs through the intermediary of the sign of the zodiac. It would be pleasant to be able to suggest that this is not actually as difficult as it appears, but such is not the case. To understand these concepts may require a Herculean effort on the part of one who approaches them purely intellectually. The corrective comes for those who project themselves astrally into the tarot cards. The actual experience of these energies is the only way to make real sense from principles, of necessity, expressed coldly. The magician is Mercury, life-death. The empress is Venus, peace-war. The high priestess is the moon, wisdom folly. The wheel of fortune is Jupiter, riches poverty. The tower is Mars, grace indignation. The sun is the sun, fertility, barrenness. The universe is Saturn, power, servitude. These are the primary attributions of the planets to the tarot cards, though, as is indicated in the illustrations, each sign of the zodiac is ruled by a planet. There are only 3 paths on the tree of life without some planetary reference. These are the paths of the maternals. A most important principle is embedded in this fact and in the specific placement of the maternals on the tree of life. See above illustration. Planetary attributions to the tree of life. The planets attached to Sephiroth are indicated in heavy type. Also in heavy type are those planets directly attributed to paths. Associated tarot trumps are given beneath. The 7 planetary paths are the 7 double letters of the Sephiroth. Planets in light type are paths attributed to signs of the zodiac ruled by those planets. Note that the only paths which do not in some way relate to planets are those of the Hebrew letters called maternals. Air, water, and fire. The simple letters. Signs of the zodiac. The 12 simple letters are the foundation of these 12 properties. Sight, hearing, smell, speech, taste, sexual love, work, movement, anger, mirth, imagination and sleep. These 12 simple letters he designated and combined and formed with them the 12 celestial constellations of the zodiac. One figure shows the signs of the zodiac on the tree with the corresponding tarot keys. This should be studied with the figure which considers the attribution of elements to the same sign on each path. The Emperor is Aries, sight. The Hierophant is Taurus, hearing. The Lovers is Gemini, smell. The Chariot is Cancer, speech. Strength is Leo, taste. The Hermit is Virgo, sexual love. Justice is Libra, work. Death is Scorpio, movement. Temperance is Sagittarius, anger. The Devil is Capricorn, mirth. The Star is Aquarius, imagination. The Moon is Pisces, sleep. Thus, the totality of the human condition is represented in the 22 cards of the Major Arcana. The maternal cards are the primary spiritual force. The double letter cards are the opposing conditions affecting the individual in incarnation. The simple letter cards are the activities in which the individual engages. In terms of the microcosm and macrocosm, the maternal letters are the roots of any given form of consciousness, the double letters are the gateways or orifices of the body, and the single letters are the organs. Some very profound insights will result from meditation on the incarnation of the various aspects of the letters. The cube of space. A slight feeling of despair may be a common reaction to one's first encounter with this diagram, which may appear to add the last straw to what is an already unbearably heavy weight of symbolism. But in actuality, anyone who can follow a subway map of New York City will have no problem with the cube of space. It is a sort of internal map of the universe, given in the Sephiroth, where a direction is assigned to each letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Many of the symbols discussed in this book are a great deal more accessible than they might at first appear. The cube of space is a good example, and one which may serve to demonstrate the extent to which Kabbalistic symbols are meant to be used in our internal learning process. If we sit quietly, we may conceptualize our thoughts, feelings and spiritual being as controlled from a central point in our heads. Perhaps this could be called the I point. Once we have focused on this internal point, we can begin to think about how it relates to principles of an inner universe. These principles are the corners and directions of the cube. So what we do is to make believe that our consciousness is inside a cube, giving our intelligence something concrete, though artificial, with which to begin inner exploration. The cube of space is simple enough, though it is a very different pattern of symbolism than is found on the tree of life. And, while the Sephiroth describes this cube of space very precisely, it is not so easily related to the tree. The problem arises in that the document does not specifically ascribe to paths between Sephiroth as is understood today. And, as we have seen, some versions of the tree do not show a complete 22 paths. One possible explanation, espoused by a large number of scholars, is that the book represents a purposeful attempt to fuse 2 different methods of approach to the inner worlds, using a type of logic similar to that of the Neo-Pythagoreans, popular in the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. The least that can be said is that, like the Bahar, there are aspects of the Sephiroth which are not easily accommodated into our modern symbolic structure. On the other hand, the cube of space demonstrates certain relationships not at all obvious on the tree of life. One primary example is the symbolic crossing of the 3 maternals. It is also more consistent with the directions of traditional ritual: east, west, north and south. Gareth Knight describes this as the upper room, a method of relating our mundane spatial perspectives to an inner experience as a matter of orientation. It must, however, be stressed that none of the external systems truly indicate the quality of the inner experience of the paths. The reason that they all appear so complex and disjointed is that they attempt to suggest experiences which our language is inadequate to describe. No matter how dogmatic one may be about the intellectual intermesh of symbols, the most intricate commentary on these matters is often like the medieval clerics who postulated the number of angels that would fit on the head of a pin. Yet some statements which appear to be symbolic turn out to be very precise descriptions of a universal experience. It is up to the discrimination of the student to decide which is which. Only the inner experience of these paths make clear what the various systems of symbols are trying to explain. And until such time as we encounter directly the energies of the tarot cards, we strive to form concepts about these energies through such artificial devices as the Tree of Life and through such methods as the Kabbalistic manipulation of numbers. Numerology. Kabbalistic numerology is called gematria. This involves nothing more than taking the numerical value of each Hebrew letter in a word and adding those values together. Theoretically, words of the same total value bear some conceptual relationship, although the principle can be taken to absurd extremes. Gematria can be a petty trap. The interrelationship of numbers and letters often, however, points to some profound ideas. For example, we have considered the reinteraction of Chokmah and Binah, whose union gives rise to Tifereth. The Yod and He produce the vow. As a number, Yod is 10 and He is 5. Added together they are 15, which reduces to 6, the numerical value of vow. Even the most skeptical may agree that for the relationship of the numerical values to be precisely that relationship assigned to the letters as philosophical values is interesting. These patterns occur with such frequency and consistency that they seem clearly intended to teach. Westcott's fine explanation of gematria is reprinted by Aleister Crowley in his Equinox. We repeat here one of his examples which uses the god name Ruach Elohim, meaning the spirit of Elohim. The numerical value of this phrase is easily derived, as is shown below. Having found the letters to have a total value of 300, we discover a parallel in that the letter Shin also has a value of 300. Shin is the maternal letter of spiritual fire. If the 300 is reduced, it becomes 3, the number of Binah, implying a relationship of both the Ruach Elohim and the potencies symbolized by Shin to the first formative sephira. Through gematria, a total energy is considered as the sum of its parts. The same approach can be taken graphically by using the tarot to spell God names. Ruach Elohim, for example, is composed of the energies symbolized by the following image above. Sets of paths. Another way to consider the keys is in terms of equilibrium and opposites. Here the Fool is viewed as the opposite of the Magician, or the Chariot the opposite of the Hierophant on the basis of their position on the Tree of Life. It is important to note that position is the consideration here, since some authorities establish card opposites in other ways. Beyond gematria as a means for examining the tree's internal workings, one begins to look for paths that are related in special ways. In this regard, we have already suggested that certain sets of 3 paths define aspects of the self, that is, the supreme spiritual self, the higher self and the personality. Other sets of paths are more obvious, such as those of the flaming sword, where each card is important to the process of emanation of the universe basis of their position on the Tree of Life. It is important to note that position is the consideration here, since some authorities establish card opposites in other ways. One of the most potent sets of paths is that of the middle pillar and involving the high priestess. What this diagram says, in essence, is that through the experience of 3 separate types of energy, we may attain knowledge of the ultimate Godhead. The cards on the middle pillar. There are only 3 cards which are actually on the middle pillar, but to travel these paths means also to cross through the potent energies symbolized by 3 other cards. Note also that the path of the High Priestess extends through the abyss. If we apply the definitions of the 32 paths of wisdom in the same way, we find these 3 major paths described, in order of their progress toward the Godhead, as the administrative intelligence, the universe, the organizing structure behind our material environment, the intelligence of probation, temperance, perhaps the most difficult path on the entire Tree of Life, one of spiritual alchemy and of the dreadful dark night of the soul, leading to knowing immersion of the personality into the consciousness of the higher self, the uniting intelligence, the high priestess, the path by which all that has appeared to be separated from the Godhead is reunited. The point here is the extent to which the ancient Kabbalistic documents amplify our appreciation of the tarot and vice versa. Patterns of form and force on the Tree of Life. The activating paths are Yod, the formative paths are He, the crossing paths, and those of the middle pillar are the Vav. Note that the word formative is used here rather than passive, chosen by some authorities. There is no inertia on the Tree of Life, it is in a state of constant activity, the formative process being a response to the activation. This is not neutral in the sense that the word passive would imply. Here one might usefully consider the fact that the Emperor is a formative path rather than an activating one, and the fact that Binah, like the path of the Emperor, is bright red in Atsalith. The initiatory scheme of the tarot. As we have seen, the tree of life is based on one very simple principle, that of a positive and a negative which, between them, produce a third and balanced energy. These are the yod, het and vau of the divine name. A variety of terms describe this pattern, such as male, female, neuter, father, mother, son. Above figure labels the Sephiroth centers of force and form, whereas the paths are called activating and formative. This slight distinction is made to point out that the Sephiroth are centers of energy, while the paths are the subjective experiences between those centers. Before proceeding further, it seems important to point out that a complex discussion which follows is presented not so much for its content as for its method of analyzing the tree. The tree of life is a system of triangles made up of paths which are activating, formative and balancing. This is an absolute Kabbalistic given, a universal pattern. In light of this pattern, let us return to the idea that each of the key triangles on the tree refers to one part of the soul. The supernal triangle is the supreme spiritual self, the ethical triangle is the higher self, and the astral triangle is the personality and incarnation. This idea, which was particularly developed by Diane Fortune, places special importance on 9 tarot cards. The core structure of each part of the self is composed of 3 aspects: an activating, yod fire, a formative, he water, and an energy which is balancing, van air, as is shown in figure. One important clue to the symbolism is that he water, wherever it appears, means consciousness. In some tarot cards this is a universal consciousness, while in others it is the personal consciousness. Yod fire is the motive principle, what Faber Dolivet called the intellectual volitive principle. It is that on which consciousness acts. Vau air is the balance between these two, which sustains their interaction. What is important to appreciate is that the pattern is implicit at all levels. And, having seen the activities of the yod, het and vau within the core structures of the self, we look for the same pattern in the path energies around these core structures. This very complicated chart is based on the idea that each of the triangles on the tree represents a given part of the soul, the spiritual self, the higher self and the personality. If we accept this idea, we are accepting that 9 of the paths, shown in black, are givens, each being the positive, negative or balance of one aspect of the soul. The question must then be asked: how do the other 13 paths relate to the given 9? The 9 cards of the self are clearly defined. What is then required is an appreciation of the relationship of the other cards to these givens. We know, first of all, that each path represents a specific lesson about the self, a lesson required to fully understand the core aspect, triangle, of the self to which it relates. Here it will be seen that the subsidiary paths operate in the same pattern of zigzag energies across the tree as do the Sephiroth. Considering only the outermost paths. The 4 upper paths are the extremes of energy which maintain the opposite pillars, and which may thus be called paths of stabilizing extreme energy, which is either activating or formative. We then discover that at each level, the 2 paths on either side of the balanced middle pillar share the qualities of the cards beside them. An even more complicated and interesting scheme appears, one which reveals card relationships obvious in no other way. Each stabilizing extreme path is related to an inner connecting path, that is, the lovers, the emperor, the devil, death. These inner paths connect the levels of the self, rather than being a part of either pillar. They may also be considered the lesser extremes of activating and formative energies. These, and the paths of the middle pillar, can be called probationary paths. To some extent, these definitions are arbitrary, yet it is essential that we make an attempt to place what we know into an overall intellectual perspective. From there we begin to internalize, personalize, concepts, so that we view our own lives differently than before. This process can be frustrating and painful. Everyone who works seriously with the tree of life reaches a point where they are no longer able to take the symbols at face value, where the symbols seem somehow shallow and empty. It is then that one begins to ask, how do each of the paths and tarot keys relate to me personally? The question may grow from an internal observation of one's own thinking process, what the Hermetic mysteries would call watching the watcher. We are all aware of our own consciousness, although it is something on which very few people ever stop to focus attention. And as we observe our own process of attention to ourselves, we may well ask how the consciousness, as well as the observation of it, fits on the tree of life. To answer this question, let us consider our own bodies. The Qabalah neatly fits our physical vehicles into Malkuth, using the 1-tree system, or Asaya, on the 4-tree system. Moreover, while the body is a totality, working as a unity in whatever physical operation we may perform, we conceptualize its components as separate for the sake of understanding their individual contribution to the whole. The head is not the hand, although one does not function without the other. And it is not difficult to apply the various parts of the tree of life to the body. No great intellectual effort is required. But when we become aware of our own consciousness, the personality I that functions in our heads, we may experience difficulty in relating what we observe to the tree of life. Our self-awareness, which is in actuality limited to the personality for most, does not fit anywhere on the tree of life in O.T.O. The package of thoughts and feelings which we observe does not seem specifically applicable to any sephira or path. It can be said that Hod is intellect, that Netzach is intuition and feelings, or even that Yesod is our faculty of imagination. But when we think about something, we are not functioning exclusively in Hod, any more than when we use our imagination we are functioning exclusively in Yesod. These qualities are not specific, they are fluid and interwoven. In fact, we are, of necessity, functioning on all paths at once. Our personality consciousness is the combined effect of what happens on these lower paths. We cannot separate our thinking capacity from our feeling capacity, but we can focus on either, the alchemical process of dissolution. To do so is to begin the conscious traveling of a path, where we encounter the trail left by many others who have pursued the same process. The paths are partly the artificial separation out of 22 discrete aspects of consciousness, they are also the encounter of the same specific qualities in the universal consciousness of mankind. Using the formula as above, so below, we begin by studying our own personal intellectual and intuitive functions. As we begin to understand these, we also begin to recognize their patterns in all created human beings. It may, thus, be appreciated why it is only possible to express these qualities in terms of symbols. The separation of the body, the personality, the higher self and the spirit is only conceptual, the symbols providing a focus for study of any specific aspect of the inherently indivisible whole. 32 Paths of Wisdom. The 32nd path is the administrative intelligence, and it is so called because it directs and associates in all their operations the 7 planets, even all of them in their own due course. Study of the paths begins not with the first card, the Fool, but with the last, the Universe. This is because we ascend the tree of life, working from our material perspective, below, to the realms of pure spirit, above. Our understanding of the more refined universal patterns is based on what we learn on this earth. It is with the earth that serious esoteric work begins and ends, as long as our divine consciousness is functioning through a physical vehicle. The path of Tao, the universe, joins Malkuth, the earth, with Yesod, the foundation. It is the first path out of the material condition and leads toward an understanding of the personality forged by the higher self of Tifereth for each incarnation. The 32 Paths of Wisdom calls this the administrative intelligence and says that it directs and associates in all their operations the 7 planets. Symbolically, this path connects the earth with the balanced powers of microprosopis represented by the hexagram, 7 planets on the tree of life. Tau is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Between Aleph and Tau is the entire universe, referred to in Christian Greek terms as the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. Tau means cross, a T-cross as well as one which is equal-armed, which is appropriate to its position on the cube of space, as described in the Sefer Yetzirah. That book refers to Tau as the palace of holiness, sustaining all things. It is both power and servitude. And, when considered on the cube of space, it is found to be at the exact central point of the 3 maternal letters, Aleph, Mem and Shin, the symbolic forms of energy from which manifestation was created. The path of the universe is the key to all of this because it falls at the point where they all cross. This crossing point, where these primary energies are balanced, is the sanctum sanctorum of the devotional mysteries. Some writers have even described this path as heaven, or nirvana, meaning that here one experiences the consciousness of the greater universe, an ultimate reality by comparison with our sensory condition. And by the formula of as above, so below, we understand that our experience of the completed universal pattern below tells us something about the creator above. One symbol which can be applied to both the Fool in the universe, the beginning and the end, is the swastika or Gamadian. In Kether its arms spin so rapidly that they merge and are perceived as a unified point. Such is the lesson of the Fool. On the path of the universe, however, it could be said that the swastika has slowed its spin so that each of the arms is completely perceptible and are seen to be perfect balanced around the central point. This is the complete expression of the one in matter. In discussing the universe we are really discussing the world of matter. Most people have a dualist conception of themselves. They are body and mind, and when they dream or meditate, the images which come to them are considered to be divorced from the physical. Yet the mysteries have stated for generations that the cosmos is all mind, and that the distinction between mind and body is one of perception, not of actuality. In fact, when we close our eyes and see pictures, what we are first seeing is the most refined form of matter, the images and energy forms which are closest to the physical condition. The concept which must be grasped, an admittedly difficult one, is that most of the physical world is unseen. It is for this reason that on the scheme of the four worlds, the Malkuth of Asaya alone is described as our sphere of sensation. The idea is symbolized in the card by the seven-pointed star representative of the seven palaces of Asaya. To experience the path of the universe is to be taken to the gateway of these seven palaces. The universe symbolizes a path where the components of the universal plan become apparent without necessarily being understood. One may enter the Holy of Holies and encounter these forces in such a way that he is in them, but not of them. What is important is that, as opposed to other paths, the energies are all present in their full expression and are self-balanced. This, as well as the idea that Tao is the central point of the Aleph, Mem and Shin paths, is what is meant by the equal armed cross. From the standpoint of practical mysticism, the universe may be considered the most important card in the deck, for it is the point at which we begin the process of inner exploration. It is the point where we step abruptly into a reality that may be at once frightening and reassuring, because so much of what we encounter on this path is of our own making. It is on this path that we encounter our own individual personality consciousness, all that is inside our heads, divorced from the security of physical reality. It is the initiation of the personality into its own structure, which is a microcosmic universe. At the same time, we encounter symbols and ideas which are of a greater consciousness than our own, and begin to see the ways in which our being relates to a total universal picture. This is a path which can only be successfully traveled by those who have begun to bring their personalities into a self-understanding balance. Those who have not will find themselves tormented by phantoms of their own making, and the gates closed to them. On the other hand, those who have truly come to grips with the life experience will find inner help and encouragement at every step. It is on the path of the universe that one discovers the extent to which the process of inner exploration is guided and, particularly, the very real protection and assistance given mankind by the archangels. Until one begins these exercises, the archangels are merely an abstraction, something in which one can vaguely believe or disbelieve. A word of caution might be in order here. Insofar as the universe is a path of entry to the astral, it must be borne in mind that the astral seeks to deceive. A great many people believe themselves to be on one path or another when they are, in actuality, entertaining themselves with an extended fantasy. We must be extremely cautious in accepting any of the images which appear to us as a reality of any sort until we have applied every test of reason and feeling. There comes a time when we know that what we are experiencing could not possibly be of our own making because we are actually learning. We are acquiring new information which can often be verified or corroborated by research. One way or the other, a considerable amount of the gross must be sorted out before we come to the subtle. This is one of the most important lessons of the universe, a path which must be approached with the virtue of Malkuth, that of discrimination. It is only through discrimination that we can place ourselves in the administrative balance, symbolized by the dancing woman draped with the calf-shaped scarf, reference to the Wheel of Fortune, and surrounded by the animal symbols of the four elements. In Kabbalistic terms, what is represented is, again, the principle of the four united by a fifth which is spirit. Here we may recall that the earliest Kabbalists, as in the Sefer Yetzirah, discussed only three elements: air, water and fire, with earth and spirit being a later addition to the philosophy. And, as we have seen, the tree of life has changed form over the centuries to accommodate such conceptual changes. One such important change is related to the 32nd path, which in some schemes is the only path connecting the sphere of sensation to the rest of the tree. The addition of the paths of Shin, judgment, and Kaf, the moon, while primarily bringing the number of paths in line with the Hebrew alphabet, secondarily declared a direct connection between Malkuth and the two side pillars. One very interesting illustration from the 16th century shows a man holding the entire tree by the path of the universe. So we see that for 400 years, at least, the essential interpretation of this path as an experiential foundation for consciously traveling all of the other paths has not changed, though the concept has been slightly mitigated by the addition of the two paths. The principle that we grasp the entire tree through what is taught on the path of the universe is very profound and brings us back to the idea of the as above, so below. We have discussed the will to form of Binah, the Great Mother, which is the origin of life consciousness, and which is Saturn in the exalted supernal realm. This is the same energy, now completely expressed, found on the 32nd path. The female figure at the center of the card is the fullest expression of the Great Mother, who is the Empress. She is Isis, the Ima Elohim, she is Binah, she is Saturn, she is all the principles behind what we perceive as matter, the cosmic dancer who administers and activates the elements. She is also a doorway to and from Malkuth, Saturn, who both gives life and destroys it, the great tester who rules both birth and death. When we die, leaving behind our animal skin, it is on this path that we rise like the dancer, surrounded by a ring of stars. All of the key tarot decks are agreed that the female figure should be surrounded by an oval shape of some sort. In Crowley's deck this is a ring of stars. In the Marseille and Wake decks this is a wreath. In the Golden Dawn deck the oval is formed by 12 spheres, the 12 signs of the zodiac, bound together by 72 pearls, the Shem Hamafresh, or 72 names of God. What is symbolized is both the womb of the human female, through which the child passes in birth, and the great womb into which the soul passes in death. The profound symbolism of the Great Mother through which one passes as a doorway to and from life is, unfortunately, minimized by some writers, including Case, who state that tradition claims the female figure to be hermaphroditic. That idea is unreasonable, but may be an honest attempt on the part of some Kabbalistic theoreticians to reconcile the femininity of the path with the magical image of Yezard into which it leads, a beautiful naked man. The latter represents the eternal outpouring of the Christ spirit from Tifereth, personified within Yezod before it passes down to Malkuth. The Christian mystery is not simply an event of 2,000 years ago to be recalled with reverence, it is a secret key to a natural pattern. The Christ, Buddha or Osiris or Krishna force continues to be born into our world, be sacrificed for the benefit of mankind, resurrected and assumed. This is, like the Yod He Vav He, continual to the end of time, which will be the end of the race's need for sensory experience. Time is, of course, one of Saturn's primary restrictions. As long as we are functioning within the framework of time, an event, including the downpouring and uprising of Tifereth force, must have a beginning, a middle and an end. Life processes run in waves, or spirals which come back upon themselves. This is the natural course of the Akashic fluid of Yezod. Thus, again, is the woman shown dancing. She swirls and revolves as opposed to her most abstract form of energy, the Empress, where she is placed solidly on a supernal throne. This spiral force of nature is directed by the wands which she carries. They represent active and passive energy, each of which has two poles. Crowley's card shows these natural forces as the serpent kundalini, described as coiled in Yezod. This is a reference to the primary sexual forces of nature to be encountered with the universe. These are the forces which we learn to direct in ourselves, and onto which we impose the strictures of Binah, the Great Mother, the Great Sea. Water is very important to this path, which is the Great Sea of consciousness in its most dense and difficult expression. The 32nd path might be considered a dark cave, filled with treacherous caverns and tunnels, some of which lead to the light, but others of which lead to the Qliphoth. 32 Paths of Wisdom. The 31st path is the perpetual intelligence, but why is it so called? Because it regulates the motions of the sun and moon in their proper order, each in an orbit convenient for it. The path of Shin, judgment, joins Malkuth, the earth, with Hod, splendor, the base Sephira, and completion of the pillar of severity. The earth is thus connected with that which is the ultimate expression of Binah, the will to form. It is an activating path of intellect, while its opposite, the moon, is a formative path of emotion. What is shown here as judgment is a process undergone by the personality as it strives to become conscious of its own inner working. But the judgment is not momentary or limited. It is, as the 32 Paths of Wisdom describes, perpetual. It is the continuous monitoring of the progress of the personality toward universal consciousness. That which is deemed unworthy by the angelic powers, invoked by the desire of the student traveling the paths, is slowly burned away by the redeeming fire, a process which is actually physical. The Golden Dawn text calls this path the splendor of the material world, pointing out the relationship of the path to the physical body. What is shown here is a resurrection, a rebirth. This resurrection is based on the developments of the opposite card to this path, the moon, and relates to actual physiological changes which occur in the student as the result of the disciplined quest for a greater reality. In other words, the resurrected body is physiologically rebuilt, a process stimulated by the energies of Kaf, the moon. This is what Paul Foster Case describes as the process of building a master's body. This is also a path where the components of the personality first encountered in the universe are critically analyzed and evaluated, judged. It is the bright and fiery probationary path of the intellect, as the moon is the dark, cold and watery probationary path of the emotions. These are paths introductory to the true nature of the self and incarnation, and can thus be extremely difficult. In fact, all of the elemental paths, the Fool, the Hanged Man, Judgment, are difficult to understand. The problem arises partly in that on each of these paths all of the elements are present, in either expressed or unexpressed form. We shall return to this concept. First, let us consider the pattern of the maternals. The Sefer Yetzirah states that air produces water which produces fire. The Fool is pure air, the Hanged Man is air acted upon by water, Judgment is air and water acted upon by fire within the vehicle of earth, the crucible which, in spiritual alchemy, is our own body. The Golden Dawn and Weight cards picture air above, with water between two sections of earth. It is understood that the air, water and earth are being heated and activated by the fire. There are no flames here, for the action is a slow and steady, perpetual one brought about by the archangel. This effect is on the component dualities of the individual, which are symbolized by fire and water. Mind consciousness, water, is activated by the dynamic principle, fire, in the presence of the equilibrating spirit, air, within the physical vehicle, earth. The path of judgment is, therefore, aimed at producing a balance within the individual, necessary for a total understanding of the personality structure and its relationship to the greater universe. But to say that balance is produced on this path raises a question. One might well ask how it is possible for there to be balance in any path which is not on the middle pillar. The answer is found in the idea that every symbol is a duality, containing its own opposite. As with the flashing colors, a symbol is only functional, insofar as it is a self-contained balance of two extremes. To extend this principle to the paths, we see that each path must contain the essential components of its opposite path. Here we may return to the example of Hod and Netzik, which relate to judgment and the moon respectively. Intellect applied without feeling is as pathological as feeling applied without intellect. When we travel the path of judgment we learn the lessons of the moon. And, taken to the most refined aspect of the tree of life, when we travel the path of the magician, we learn the lessons of the fool. Such cards are antithetical, but mutually explanatory. It is not possible to deal with any card without its opposite energy being present. And since the cards represent types of consciousness, it can be said that everything which we experience, every idea, every activity, coexists in us with its opposite. Such lessons on the paths are extremely practical, although this cannot be obvious as one begins to juggle the slippery concepts related to the four symbolic elements. On the other hand, the pictures on the cards bear a strong relationship to the visual experience of the paths, and a great deal can be learned by meditation on them. Path images are archetypal representations of actual inner roads, built through centuries of mind work by the most advanced men and women of all ages. These images are largely constructs built to assist us by those who have gone before. It is in this that many falter, believing the construct, the concretized symbol on the astral plane, to have a reality of its own. It is only beyond the lower astral that one touches upon the realities which activate the symbols. We may step onto the judgment path and experience initially what is shown in the tarot card. Yet beyond these visual constructs, we come to understand that the path is the enervating, activating effect of the cosmic motive principle on the individual consciousness. The fiery spirit permeates the personality consciousness in the descent of energy into matter. In the purposeful ascent of the path of Shin, the last illusions of the separateness of the personality are burned away. To reiterate the Kabbalistic symbolism, Shin contains all four elements: fire, water, air and earth. This concept may be explained developmentally. The evolution of the cosmos is from the most simple to the most complex. It goes from nothing to something. This is, applying the principle of as above, so below, a process not dissimilar to that of the zygote, which begins as a single cell, is fertilized and grows into a living human organism. The cells of the zygote multiply over and over again, until they are a body which is the receptacle of the Holy Spirit on this earth. At any stage of development, from the single fertilized cell to the finished product, the whole is implicit in the developing parts. Thus does the one grow to the 10 or 10,000 or 10 billion uncountable mind cells which form the corpus of the universe. The ultimate simplicity is the Fool, and the ultimate complexity is the universe. But the universe and all the other cards are implicit, unexpressed, in the Fool. Thus, with the cards in between, we find different stages of that which is expressed and unexpressed. Given any specific card on the tree, the energy of all the cards above it are expressed, while the energies of those cards below it are present but unexpressed. Each defines a stage of development. And, using this logic, it may be appreciated that in the Fool air is expressed, while water and fire are implicit. In the Hanged Man air and water are expressed, and fire is implicit. When we come to judgment we again find air and water expressed, now set in motion by the full expression of fire. Here it must be repeated that these patterns will be utterly meaningless until a real understanding of that which is symbolized by the various elements emerges. Every Kabbalistic symbol relates to some specific part of the self, the tarot keys being very precise definitions of parts of the human whole. The paths of judgment, the universe and the moon are aspects of the normal waking consciousness of the personality. They also represent stages of self-understanding. Judgment is the card where the divine forces meet the aspirant for the mysteries, where the personality is lifted from the tomb of matter and evaluated on the extent to which it has balanced the four elements of Malkuth. It is for this reason that people have such varying experiences on this path. Each personality must face what it is and has been, very squarely, answering the call of the angel whose presence has been invoked by the fire of desire. In all accounts it is Gabriel who blows the trumpet of the last judgment, and most will assume that it is Gabriel who is represented here. But this is not a last judgment at all, and the archangel is Michael, angelic ruler of Had. Further information about this card is conveyed by the meaning of the Hebrew letter, insofar as the name of each letter is a word. Yet, as such words are attributed to the tarot keys, there is wide latitude for interpretation within the confines of the qualities described by the given word. Shin, in this case, means tooth, suggesting hardness, sharpness and biting. It can be interpreted as the teeth which chew prior to the ingestion of energy into the system, i.e., as that which causes a release of energy, the Kundalini force. Tooth can also be taken to mean that which kills, here, meaning the final blow to the perception of the personality as separate. Such descriptive words amplify the symbolism of numbers, so important to the Hermetic Qabalah. As has been demonstrated, the number 300 assigned to Shin reduces to 3, the number of the Sephira Binah, the number of the card, 20, reduces to 2, that of the High Priestess. The principle here is that numbers of the Hebrew letters are reduced and manipulated relative to the 10 Sephiroth, while the numbers of the cards, 0 to 21, relate to other cards. Of course, the connection with other cards is made on more than numerical grounds. For example, the fact that Shin is fire suggests that it relates to two other important cards, the Tower, Mars, and the Sun. This connection with the Sun is made explicit in the Golden Dawn Book T, which describes the angel here as Michael, ruler of solar fire. It is he who blows the trumpet calling down the influence of Binah. Another reference to the supernals is the Red Cross banner, which stands for the 4 rivers of paradise, as well as the 4 letters of the divine name. The rainbow in the Orders card, containing serpents representing the fiery seraphim, is undoubtedly that which surrounds the fiery throne of God described in Revelations. This rainbow encloses the archangel who seems to emerge from the fire triangle itself. At the base of the card, rising from the tomb facing the angelic presence, is Arel, ruler of latent heat. He is also the candidate for the mysteries who follows this path of fire. The male figure at the left is Samel, ruler of volcanic fire. Opposite him is Anil, ruler of the astral light, represented in duplicate in that she is Demeter Persephone and Isis Nephthys. Crowley's card, called the Eon, departs completely from tradition and is important in that his personal philosophy is more embedded in this imagery than in that of most other cards of the Thoth Tarot. Overall, the Crowley deck is illustrative of the Book of the Law, a document which he stated was revealed to him and which is the core of his teaching. The Eon also relates to what he called the Stele of Revealing. This card, he explained, supersedes all earlier concepts of the key and shows the harmonious and spiritual state of human existence, which will be on the earth in the mid-22nd century. That condition is symbolized by the sky goddess Nuith and her consort Hadit, represented as a golden orb of light. They produce Horus, here shown seated and standing, his active and passive forms. Crowley also points out that another name for Horus is Heru, which is synonymous with Hiru, the great angel set over the tarot. What Crowley proposes here is highly consistent with Kabbalistic doctrine, that is, that the system evolves to meet the needs of spiritual evolution of the race. Assuming that judgment represents a stage in the development of the race and of the individual personality consciousness, he is suggesting that there will come a time in the not so far distant future when the spiritual makeup of mankind will have so advanced that judgment, as previously known, will no longer describe the experience of this path. He further asserts that we are now passing into a 500-year period of extreme darkness and trial, preparatory to a new eon of light.